3-2 Target Acquisition. Those that are generally thought of as the powerful in the world are the politicians, but this is part of the illusion of government. When we look at politicians, we are, as it were, looking at the grass on a hill. The grass is not the hill, and in fact the grass adds very little to the hill. But it's what we see. Like grass, politicians are seasonal. They sprout up quickly, put on a show, and then vanish into the soil, their demise bringing life to the next seasonal explosion of drama as the new generation of politicians reach for the sky. Politicians hold a temporary but obvious position that, no matter how it appears, has very little power. If you dig deeper into the hill, you find the grass is rooted in the soil, and the soil provides the nutrients that determine if the grass lives or dies. The soil is critical to the dramatic performance of the grass, so in that sense the soil, or better stated, the dirt in our metaphorical hill, is the massive network of unelected bureaucrats, party bosses, lobbyists, and the permanent understructure of men and women that do the actual running of the day-to-day functions of government. The grass comes and goes, but bureaucracy stays. These people, the dirt of governments, do the actual developing of the policies and laws. They hand down the regulations. They introduce the politicians to the right lobbyists, to the right donor, and to the right power people in corporations and banks. These people determine when, where, and how tall the grass grows. And yet, the dirt is not the hill. The hill is in reality the rocks that thrust up from the valley floor. The corporate giants and the banking cartels are the rocks that are almost unmovable. The rocks determine if there is or is not a hill. The rocks are the true power. Everything else is on the surface, protecting the rocks from exposure to the elements. So long as the rocks remain covered, they don't erode and the hill lives on. Take away the dirt and the grass vanishes, and the rocks begin to crumble and weather away. If politicians are like the grass on a hill, police are like the annoying insects that crawl all over the surface of that hill. Watching a video of a violent cop beating a pregnant woman, kicking her stomach, and stomping on her face should infuriate any sensible person. Seeing the video of the handicapped man in Florida handcuffed to a wheelchair while police walk by and casually pepper spray his face until he asphyxiates and dies should be a source of outrage and should make anyone want to act against these brutal murderers. Studying the case of Kelly Thomas, the disabled man beaten to death by Manuel Ramos, Jay Cincilli, and Joseph Wolf, who wore the uniforms of the Fullerton, California Police Department on the night of July 5, 2011, should fill your heart with both pity and rage. But the uncomfortable fact of the situation is that if there were a magic trigger we could pull that would cause every single violent, murderous cop in the world to suddenly drop dead, the actual power brokers of the state would hardly blink, as they simply hired another hive of violent, ego-driven, hate-filled idiots to replace the dead ones. Unfortunately, there is an endless sea of angry morons who would just love to have a legal excuse to beat weak people while wearing a uniform and collecting a fat paycheck. So as temporarily gratifying as it may be, simply pulling that magic trigger on a world of violent cops won't stop the process that makes them. It does little more than crushing a few ants to stop an infestation. That's not to say that given the opportunity to stop them, murderous scum should be allowed to continue their rampage upon the defenseless. Stopping the senseless beatings and killings of the innocent is one job of the individual warrior, assuming he can do so safely without exposing himself or his network. But the better target is the police chief who places the violent cop in that position and then publicly defends him when he does his evil deeds. Yet a better target still is the politician who appoints that chief, or the even higher power broker who uses his influence to say who the next mayor, senator, or president will be. The deeper you dig into the darkness, the more important and more difficult the target becomes. So, violent, dangerous police are easy targets that deserve our attention, but dealing with them won't solve our problem. As much as we would like to spend our time crushing bugs, those bugs are simply a symptom of the problem of the hill. We must expose the rocks so that the forces of nature can follow its course. One thing to keep in mind is that evil doesn't look the way the state has taught you to expect evil to appear. When you look through the eyepiece of a scope, you will not find Adolf Hitler or Hannibal Lecter. you will find someone who looks very much like you. You won't see that person as he or she kicks in a door or throws a flashbang in the crib of a baby. You won't see them as they torture and torment a prisoner. And you won't see them as they authorize a Hellfire missile strike on a family during a wedding. You'll be more likely to see them as they sit in traffic, listening to morning radio, or as they open their mailbox. This is the reason fighting and killing the state is so difficult, because it usually doesn't appear as it really is. The people who are most important to keeping the state alive are the ones we have almost no chance of reaching, and most of the ones we can easily reach don't really matter to the continuation of the state. Other than the untouchable few at the tops of the banking cartels and corporate consortiums that make the state possible, the most important targets that can actually make an impact in this war are the people referred to by Michael Glennon in National Security and Double Government as the Trumanite Network. According to Glennon, Trumanites can have no real discussions with family or friends about work because nearly all of their work is classified. They hold multiple compartmented clearances. Their offices are located in the building's expensive real estate, the Pentagon's E-Ring, the CIA's 7th floor, the State Department's 7th floor. Keypads lock their doors. Next to their desks are a safe and 2 computers, one unclassified and the other classified. Down the hall is a SCIF 167 where the most sensitive briefings take place. They speak in acronyms and code words that the public has never heard and God, and the FBI willing, never will hear. Finding and touching key members of his Trumanite network will be difficult because the camouflage they wear is the best kind of camouflage. They are a subset of the most abundant part of government, and as such, they are almost impossible to individually spot and verify simply because there are so many who basically appear like and work at similar locations as non-targets and neutrals. Here again, we see how important the role of the non-combatant underground can be in helping the discovery and exposure of the individuals of the Trumanite network. However, once discovered, we must ask if it is worth the risk of targeting an individual. The true answer to that question is that it is rarely worth the investment and risk to target them. There are exceptions that should be targeted as soon as possible, but most are no more important to the state than the violent police mentioned earlier. Most will be replaced by another Trumanite before we can assume room temperature, and investing that much work and risk into a target that will be instantly replaced is not wise. We should always do a cost-benefit analysis when selecting targets, and again, the non-combatant underground can play a critical role in that process. We'll need to have a good idea of what they do, who they work for and with, can they be easily replaced, and can we reach them with alternative methods better suited to our friend saboteur network. After all, a powerful, murderous bureaucrat who is in the middle of a massive mental breakdown due to a carefully crafted gaslight operation is more valuable to us than a simply dead body. Once again, when you look through the eyepiece and see a Trumanite, they won't look like Adolf Hitler or Hannibal Lecter, but just keep in mind that their words and actions rain death upon the innocent, while the worst part of their day is sitting in traffic trying to escape the Beltway to get to their McMansion in the suburbs. Before you feel sorry for that State Department slug, do a start page image search of the children they murdered this week. Then realize that if no one steps up and stops them, they will kill by proxy again and again and again. However, always remember how these people reacted when Michael Hastings exposed one of them to the public while planning to expose more. Now imagine what their reaction would be if we targeted 6 Trumanites in one day. If you think the LAPD went nuts when Dorner killed a few cockroaches, you won't believe how the dirt on the hill in DC will react when Uruks start dropping in Mordor, and the same goes in every other capital city around the world.